Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Eggburt, the owner of this station. Check out my website at eggburt.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, eggburt.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
You know, I'm not going to give any excuses, but I haven't had any sleep tonight because I've been in the hospital all night because I had something removed from my ear canal. So,
because you know what? If it was esophagus, then it would be gimmick infringement for Bill Eggburt.
Right. I would never do that, but I had something renewed. Once again, I had something that flew into my ear and I couldn't get it out, and I went to the hospital. And you've seen those videos, like, look what came out of this guy's ear.
Yeah.
That's me. Okay, couple things to talk about, and the reason I do that is because John knows the reason. Is the live show is one thing, but when we put together the podcast and put it on YouTube, the whole bit, I clean up all the mistakes I've made.
Hey, and now people on the live stream got to hear, I think we got a veiled reference to Phil Cristofanelli's mom in the break there, but I don't know.
Did I say something about her?
Well,
no, I don't think I did. I mean,
we were talking about something being made and people wanting to see something, Brad. I don't know.
Oh, no.
I'm going to get you in trouble.
No, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but Phil Cristofanelli's mom is a very nice lady who's very much involved in Republican politics.
Yeah, for sure.
I was sort of surprised at the level. You mentioned her name in St. Charles County, everybody knows her. Matter of fact, she texted me the other day and wanted to know if I was coming to the caucus, and she said as soon as the caucus was over, that her and her son are going out door knocking because he's running for the Senate position, correct?
That's right. That's right. And, there's news on that if we got 30 seconds.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Dave Drebus, who does the Missouri Scout newsletter, it's a paid subscription newsletter. I've known Dave for 20 years now. So he publishes a newsletter on the weekdays and then sometimes on the weekends. But he had a piece up yesterday about that state Senate race. And what's really interesting, and this has to do with your friend Bob Onder too, Brad, is that traditionally 20 years ago, you had groups of trial attorneys who were very anti-Republican. And that's because Republicans were always talking about tort reform. We got to stop these ambulance chasing lawyers from punishing our doctors. You don't hear that much about tort reform anymore, do you, Brad?
Why is that?
I'll tell you why. The first reason is because Republicans did pass what they called, quote, tort reform legislation starting about 20 years ago. But also, trial attorneys here in Missouri, they're called Missouri Association of Trial Attorneys, which is the acronym is MATA. And they made a very wise strategic choice, Brad, which is they decided, okay, Republicans are supermajority. How can we tamp down opposition to our industry? So what they did was they started giving to a group of, we could call them rogue Republicans. Those Republicans included members that would go on to become the Freedom Caucus. Now, you can connect the dots here, Brad, in a positive way. Guys like Bob Onder, Bill Eigel, other really strong conservatives, rock-ribbed conservatives, and the Missouri Association of Trial Attorneys is able to say, hey, here's our perspective on why we should be able to ply our craft legally, et cetera. Pretty much the same talking points they would have given the Democrats 20 years ago. But what the association decided to do was make some friends, make some inroads with Republicans, and maybe tamp down opposition to the legal industry. So what this has to do with Phil Cristofanelli is that the gentleman who's running against Phil in that state Senate race is a guy named Adam Schnelting. And Schnelting, according to Dave Drebus's reporting, has accepted a whole lot of money from various trial attorneys. So in other words, the trial attorneys see Phil Cristofanelli and say, okay, he's probably on this side of, any potential legislation. Let's start having conversations with Adam, who has a very good chance to win. Let's start funding him, and maybe we could have a relationship with him when he's in the Missouri State Senate.
Now, once again, and for those of you who are non-politicos, the reason that's interesting about that is we're both talking. Schnelting and Chris Fedeli are both Republicans. This is the primary in August, and pretty much, I think that the way that race is lining up, whoever wins the primary goes on to win the general. Correct?
Correct. I don't even think a Democrat. I don't believe a Democrat has filed.
Oh, so there is nobody. So in other words, whoever does win the August primary.
Yeah, there's still time to file, but I don't even think a Democrat has filed yet.
Okay, interesting. Okay, Bidenomics.com. Okay, I'm going to tell a crazy story that I still am amazed by, even though the year is 2024 and the internet, for the most part, has been around for as far as, I tell this story all the time. I first put my first website up in 1993, and I have people that say there was no internet yet. If you go back to the history of the internet, it came out of DARPA and the whole defense industry and the whole crazy stuff. It dates back to the 80s. Okay, so the internet started its presence in the early to mid 90s, and by the end of the 90s, it became mainstream. If you are a stock market person, you're familiar with what they call the dot-com meltdown, when everybody was pouring money into all these crazy dot-com companies. And it got to the point where I told the story once upon a time that one of the dot-com companies in our industry was Broadcast.com, which was owned by what's-his-face, Mark Cuban of Dallas Maverick fame. And I told the story that at one point in time, Mark Cuban wanted to have a meeting with me, and I set up a meeting and then canceled it. I
remember that story, Brad.
Because of the fact that what Mark Cuban was doing was sort of smoke and mirrors. I mean, he had a company that was doing streaming, but yet it really wasn't doing a lot, because the problem back in the 90s was you needed a lot of bandwidth to listen to streaming audio. I mean,
yes, and it was terrible. It was choppy. Right. It was horrible.
And people would get turned on to the fact, I can listen to, like at first it started out in sports, and that was Mark Cuban's interest. That let's say you lived in Philadelphia, but you had grown up in San Francisco and you were a big San Francisco Giants baseball fan, that you could go on the internet, you could listen to the San Francisco Giants, and then you could listen to it real time. Well, you could, but you couldn't, because the buffering was so bad, the thing would start and stop and the whole bit.
Yes.
Well, anyway, Mark Cuban got into this thing, and quite honestly, he didn't really have much of an operation. It was sort of a small operation, but he's a sharp guy, and I'm not saying anything bad about Mark. I have all the respect for him in the world. Yahoo got fascinated with this because they thought this was the new frontier. So they approached Mark, and they bought him out for billions with a B. And the problem was that after they bought the company, they realized there wasn't much of the company, and then they killed it. And for a long time, up until a couple of years ago, if you went to broadcast.com, it forwarded to Yahoo. And there was nothing there. It was just
interesting.
It just took you to the front page of Yahoo. So having said that, when you talk about things and you bring up a name, somebody, before it goes public, should go on to GoDaddy and say, hey, can we buy the domain name for this? That way we'll own it. Well,
absolutely.
Apparently that's not what happened with Bidenomics, because it's now an anti-Joe Biden website. If you go to Bidenomics.com, did you go take a look at it?
Yeah, and you saw who's funding it.
I did not see that. Who is that?
Scroll down to the very bottom. For folks who don't have a computer or a smartphone at their disposal, Americans for Prosperity.
Oh, AFP's behind that. Interesting.
Now, remember, with the shout out to our friends who receive a paycheck from Americans for Prosperity, what has Americans for Prosperity been in the news for in the last 2 weeks, Brad?
Boy, I can't. I've heard, it's on the top of my mind, but I can't quite.
I'll tell you, they pulled out from supporting Nikki Haley's campaign after a string of losses. They were big Nikki Haley supporters. And they dumped what I'm guessing is at least tens of millions of dollars they bet on Nikki Haley early, and it didn't quite pan out. So days after, it looks like they launched this website, it says, according to news reports, 3 days ago.
Yeah.
So a good way for them maybe to rebuild the brand would be like, okay, we made a whole lot of people mad by loudly supporting Nikki Haley. P.S. We still don't like Joe Biden. Visit Bidenomics.com.
Well, the interesting thing was, I saw this in an article. It's funny you say 3 days ago, which today's Thursday. I saw this in an article on Monday, and I went to Bidenomics.com, and I got some weird server response. And I thought to myself,
interesting.
Okay, what's going on with this? And later that day, I tried it. Sometimes, depending upon what your network, the network you're on, sometimes certain things don't necessarily sync up to the internet right away. So I was on my phone, and I went off my Wi-Fi, and I went just to the outside world, which essentially gives me a different internet connection. And I got the same thing. Well, then on Tuesday, it was there. Quite honestly, it's a very slick website, and it's like question and answer kind of thing, and it addresses every single point of the economic situation, and it just tears apart Biden, and it sort of lays bare the fallacy that Bidenomics has been good for anybody.
Right.
Am I wrong on that?
I didn't click on them because we're on the air, but it looks like a black guy at a gas station. I imagine it's a lot of proverbial man on the streets of how much does the economy suck and how much does your household budget suck in the last 4 years.
Well, it's sort of like you and I talked about this yesterday, and I heard this talked about on Eric Erickson's show after us, and also on Mark Lee Van Camp and Robinson, who were also on the station after us. They all were laughing about the fact that the was it CNN the experts were talking about. Well, there's no border crisis, and they were they were making fun of the West that there.
I'm sorry. I know exactly what you're talking about, and it was Jen Psaki was on MSNBC,
right,
and they were mocking Americans' concern about the immigration crisis.
Right, and they were saying something. Maybe we should put it, because they live in Virginia, and they said maybe we should put a wall up between us and West Virginia. And I'm going okay, whatever. Okay, so I can't believe that the people in the White House did not buy Bidenomics.com.
Now, however, Brad, do we know how long ago the domain was actually purchased? So what if somebody purchased this? What if somebody had the foresight to purchase this 2 years ago? I'm not saying they did.
Could be, and they might have, because there's a whole market, secondary market on. A matter of fact, it used to be, if I had some of the domains I had bought back in 1993, 1994, 1995, I'd be a rich person.
Yeah,
and
because the domain auctions, and you can put it up, and every domain service makes it easy for you to essentially squat. And then you can anonymously accept bids for your domains that you purchase.
That's the point I was making. Back in the day, when I was buying these domain names, there was no secondary market for them. I mean, other than you literally, putting an ad in the newspaper or something like that. I own XYZ.com, and you can have it for that kind of a thing. Okay, so you're right, but I still find it interesting that, and I'll give you two quick examples. Okay, years ago, the guy at the CEO of Panera was this jerkazoid kind of guy, and I'm not being rude. I'm just saying what he was. He was a jerkazoid kind of guy because, matter of fact, I had a little interaction with their company because they came up with this thing. They were touting the fact that our new kids' meals are so good and so nutritious, and what he did was he was taunting the CEOs of McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King to go on the kids menu challenge, and he was going to.
I remember the story, Brad.
He was going to show them how much that And I heard this. I thought to myself, what a jerk. I mean, that's like saying, hey, come to the Italian bakery and everything we have is calorie free. It was like, no, it's not. I mean, it's just sort of like BS kind of stuff. So I thought to myself, and I heard this for a couple of days, the CEO of so and so of Panera is offering the kids menu challenge to his cohorts at McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's. So I go on GoDaddy, and there it is. I'm going like, I can't believe it. There's kidsmenuchallenge.com.
Still available.
So I bought it, and I put up my own kids menu challenge where I did eat nothing but kids menus, the kids meals and stuff like that. And I lost like 30 pounds. Okay.
I remember that story. Yeah. And you documented, and with Little McFreddy's, you've also documented your actual eating of the meals too, right, Brad?
I didn't. That's one I'm not proud of them. The other one is fastfoodme.com. Okay. Here's my other quick weird story. You know who what's his name? Mike Ditka, the former coach of the
Bears and the Saints.
Chicago Bears, okay. When I was still doing sports on Crap, our station was sports, and we had the CBS Sports Radio Network, okay? And it was about this time of the year. I want to say it was maybe, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, something like that. And there was a deal where the Werner, Werner ladder company had come up with a special ladder called the Werner Podium Ladder, okay? And they had used Mike Ditka, and matter of fact, talking about sponsoring everything, the Werner Ladder Company had cut a deal with the NCAA that they used this ladder. They had these ladders at all the tournaments, and especially when the Final Four and when they actually had, the NCAA, winner, they would take this ladder out onto the court, and the players would step up on this ladder to cut down the net, okay?
It's brilliant, yeah.
So it was the Werner Podium Ladder, okay? The interesting thing was, and this is like a big screw up with the advertising agency or whoever's doing it, Mike Ditka could not say the word Werner. Instead, he said Werner. So instead of saying Werner, and the name of the company is Werner, he would say the Werner Podium Ladder. So I thought to myself, and I heard this on my station, like this ad was running like once an hour. So I go on GoDaddy, and sure enough, Werner Podium Ladder is available. So I bought it, and I forwarded it to my sports crap website. Every time that commercial ran, I got a bump of anywhere between 1,000 and 3,000 hits on my website.
Incredible.
Every single time. And I'm thinking to myself, how could they miss this?
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, Brett, not to preempt that story, but that's the thing is if you're building a brand, you have to look at common keystroke errors too.
Exactly.
And that's what a lot of these companies do.
Exactly.
They'll not only buy when Bayer eventually in 3 years spins off the ag division and they call it Super Regen Grow, somebody will buy domains, good Lord willing, from that company that's Super Regen Grew, Super Regen Grew. Like you buy the keystroke errors because it might cost you $100 a year, but you have that domain.
Right, and you're exactly right, and to the point where you don't know how many times I hear ads on the radio, and I think to myself, and that's why, and when I first got to know you, I think you actually mentioned this to me. That's why I always say spell your website, right? Because of the fact that there's so many websites that if you just say dungeonsanddragons.com, okay, people are going to go, okay, I know how to spell dragons, but how do you spell dungeons? And like you said, you take the permutations of that. You go through and you go, okay, if somebody spells it DON, JUNS, you go like, and bang, you can essentially get that person's traffic.
Yeah. And we could say this without being condescending, Brad. I think so. But not everybody is a great speller. You and I are communicators. But if you're a math guy or a math gal, then, you might not spend a lot of time imagining words in your head. You might not be a great speller, or you might be driving. There's a million reasons why you'd spell something wrong.
I get it. Okay, we're behind. We had to take a break.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?